Well, hello everybody. I'm Jed Carney, the Assistant Minister for Health and Aged Care. Thank you for inviting me to speak to you today. Chronic pain is a topic that is very close to my heart, so I am really sorry I can't be there in person with you for this important conversation. I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I'm recording this message, and I pay my respects to elders past and present, and I extend that respect to First Nations people there with you today. This week, National Pain Week, is an important one. It's important because having a national week for pain raises visibility on an often hidden condition. It helps push forward a much needed national conversation because chronic pain is invisible in so many ways. For the 3.6 million Australians living with chronic pain, their suffering often cannot be seen by naked eye. It's invisible to those they pass on the streets, and even sometimes to their loved ones. The hours and hours of unrecognised labour by carers are also often unseen. The broader public do not understand that this pain can be severe enough to restrict the activities in day-to-day lives of people living with chronic pain. Their attendance at social events, at family birthdays, playing sport, going to work. And what's more is the toll that all this can take on people's mental health, causing depression and anxiety. Nearly 3/4 of people living with chronic pain feel ignored or dismissed when raising their pain with health professionals. Many feel powerless. Others feel dehumanised. And there's also a hidden economic cost, both to the healthcare system and the loss in productivity. I think part of the reason why pain is so often misunderstood is because of Australia's masculine-leaning battler mentality. All too often we're told to just push ahead, to suck it up, just get on with it. Now this approach is just wrong. I know that everyone here today knows this, but for the rest of us it's an important lesson that we as a country need to learn. So it's great that we have National Pain Week, because this week raises awareness about the resources available for people living with chronic pain, the support mechanisms for carers, and through all of this brings a spotlight on how we view and speak about pain. It will mean we can make a dent in figures that tell us that nearly half of those people living with chronic pain take longer than 3 years to get a diagnosis, or that 1 in 10 are still undiagnosed. I want to sincerely thank everyone at Chronic Pain Australia for everything you do in education, in awareness, in support, and in building community. You are leading the change. The Albanese Labor government recognises the significant impact chronic conditions such as chronic pain have on Australians, and we support your mission. It's why we fund the National Strategic Action Plan for Pain Management, which is about addressing effective care and management for people living with chronic pain. It's a whole-of-care approach with a focus on supporting self-management. As Assistant Minister for Health, I'm particularly proud of the work that we're doing in women's health and addressing women's pain. For too long, women's health has been dismissed, ignored and overlooked. And last year, I launched a national survey on women's experience of discrimination in the health system. The results, while shocking, were sadly not surprising. 2 in 3 women who responded have experienced gender bias in the health system. Women told us they're not being listened to, and when they are being listened to, they're not being given the proper care. Too often they're told again to just suck it up. That's just a woman's lot. It's not surprising then that 1 in 5 women with chronic pain felt stigmatised by their spouse or life partner. Now, I'm working with my Women's Health Advisory Council to address these findings, and we will have more to say on this soon. But one initiative I did want to highlight is the Albanese Labor government's specialist endometriosis and pelvic pain clinics. We've invested over $50 million to set up 22 dedicated specialist clinics around the country. They offer multidisciplinary care for women, a place where they can finally be listened to and have their pain treated by empathetic professionals. I've spoken with so many women who have told me just how life-changing these clinics have been for them. So as we mark National Pain Week, I want to again commend Chronic Pain Australia for its work and for coordinating the week each year. In advocating to reduce the social and economic barriers to those who live with chronic pain, you and your committed volunteers are the national voice, and I want to assure you that we are listening to that voice. Working with you, I trust we can make real improvements for the 3.6 million Australians living with chronic pain. Thank you.
Welcome, community. My name is Nicolette Ellis and I am the chair of Chronic Pain Australia. And thank you to the Honourable Jed Carney for that opening address to the State of Pain panel discussion. Firstly, I would like to invite Anish Patel, who is General Manager of Halion, who has been the lead sponsor for National Pain Week and the National Pain Report. Anish is going to provide an acknowledgement to country and speak as the lead sponsor for National Pain Week. Thank you, Anish.
Thank you, Nicolette. Good morning and welcome to the State of Pain panel discussion. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and future and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people today. I want to thank Chronic Pain Australia for bringing us together today to kick off National Pain Week in 2024. My name is Anish Patel and I am the General Manager of Halion Australia and New Zealand. If you're wondering who Halion is, you probably know us better through some of our pain relief brands that you're likely to have in your medicine cabinet, such as Panadol, Voltaren and Advil. We're really pleased to be the leading sponsor of National Pain Week in 2024. It is a flagship event driven by data, lived experiences and insights from leading experts that ignites conversation, awareness and champions change to help people in pain, specifically the 3.6 million people living with chronic pain. You are all here today because pain is part of your world. Whether you are living with pain yourself or you care for or work with someone in pain, we all know that whilst often invisible at face value, pain has the ability to weave itself mercilessly into our facets of life. Quality of our sleep, our mobility, our ability to work, manage our house, care for our kids, and look after our loved ones. And it has profound impacts on our lives and our ability to participate in community life. The theme of 2024 National Pain Week, Pain Changes, Let Your True Colours Shine Through, really resonates with me, as we know that many people in pain are often live with a shadow cast over their true colours, not just debilitated by their pain, but also feeling lonely, isolated, and stigmatised by it. Since 2014, Halion has conducted a longitudinal social study looking at and comparing the state of pain in numerous countries around the world, including Australia, and that is called the Halion Pain Index. The most recent research told us that over 1 in 3 Australians say they fear others may judge them if they talk about pain. 2 in 5 Australians say discussing pain is taboo, and they prefer to avoid drawing attention to it. This culture of stigma and taboo around pain has to change. This brings us back to why we are all here today, to take collective action towards better outcomes for pain sufferers through pain management strategies and by breaking down barriers, helping to create a society where those in pain don't feel like they need to suffer in silence, where their true colours can shine through. Halion is proud to support people living with pain and is passionate about making better everyday health accessible to all Australians. It's a privilege to support Chronic Pain Australia this National Pain Week, and we can't wait to hear what the panellists have to say today. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Anish, and to Halion for the generous sponsorship for the National Pain Week and the National Pain Report. It's my pleasure to introduce our expert panel today. Kimberly Grimmer, who is a chronic pain warrior and peer mentor to women living with chronic pain in Australia. Joyce McSwan, who is president of the Australian Pain Society. Professor Mick Bagg, who's a favourite amongst our chronic pain community. He's a specialty pain medicine and rehabilitation physician. Julia Jones, who's Chief Executive Officer of Pain Australia. Professor Mark Hutchinson, who is a medical scientist specialising in neuroimmune contributions of chronic pain. Anne Daly, who is a specialist pain and musculoskeletal physiotherapist. And handing over to a very familiar face and much loved person from the Chronic Pain Australia community is our founder, Coralie Wales, who will be moderating today's session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicolette. And can I pay tribute to you and your team on really taking Chronic Pain Australia into new territory, strong territory. And my own observation is that people are not frightened of talking about it as they were 20 years ago. It's really quite a testament to the hard work. And might I also remind everybody that most people in Chronic Pain Australia are volunteers. So congratulations, Nicolette. And I would also like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land all around Australia where we're all sitting today. I must admit, after 10 years of national pain surveys, some things are improving and some things are not. But it's really shocking to know that nearly half of those people in chronic pain are in their prime earning years. And this impacts, as Australia forges ahead, we hope, this large number of people who are affected by chronic pain are really having an impact on national productivity. Nearly half of all survey respondents, and there was a very large number of people that responded to the survey, have had to stop working because of their pain. And almost a third of those have had to limit their hours. So this also impacts Australians in their most productive years, which is 25 to 65. It's really shocking when you think of it that way. But I'd like to introduce Julia Jones to speak about this. Julia is the CEO of Pain Australia. Julia, would you like to say a few words about the health economic impact of chronic pain? Over to you, Julia.
Thanks, Coralie, and congratulations to Chronic Pain Australia for another great Pain Week, bringing attention to this very important issue that we work to improve for our community. As has been said a great deal this morning, 3.6 million Australians live with chronic pain. 53.8% of them are women, and 68.3% of them are actually of working age. This goes against the initial impressions that the community may have had, which is that pain affects older people and people after they've finished at work. It's really important to note that, as we've been saying a lot at Pain Australia, the typical pain consumer is a woman in the middle of her working years. And it's so there is a gendered element to the pain debate. We want men and women to do well despite chronic pain, and we want to see recovery wherever possible. And it is possible in many cases, recovery of life and recovery of activity. And sometimes people can even go into remission from chronic pain. And this is a great and exciting thing that we're starting to see all around the world now. Pain costs the Australian economy in 2018 $139 billion, according to the Deloitte Access Report of 2019. And by 2050, it is estimated that it will cost the Australian economy $215 billion. So it's an urgent and important matter. But I think what Chronic Pain Australia and Pain Australia spend all our time seeing are the individuals, and the individuals who become overwhelmed by their pain and who worry about how to find advice about what to do about their pain. That personal impact is the thing that drives us every day to see systems in the health system more adept at managing people with chronic pain. And we would love to see better care at the GP level so that our specialists can be dealing with those who really need specialist care. So look, thanks again to everybody. What a great pain week. Definitely, we have a huge economic impact of chronic pain in our community, and the statistics show that. And we're very glad that with the work that we've both been doing, we really are starting to get some traction in the mainstream community, and congratulations, everyone.
Thank you, Julia. That's a big number, $215 billion. That's a huge impact. I'd like to introduce Anne Daly. Anne is a physiotherapist and work cover advisor. And what are your thoughts on reducing that impact for the individual? What are some of the strategies that people use when they're trying to return to work?
Thanks, Coralie, and thanks for the invitation to participate today. The first thing I want to say is it's not easy staying at work or returning to work when you have pain. And I don't want to underemphasize that. Everybody's situation is different, but if it's at all possible, it's really important to try and remain at work, because in many ways, work is good for you. And we know that it's good for you, definitely in a financial sense, but also in terms of physical strength, your psychological well-being, and even just the social aspects of work. So wherever it's possible, hanging on to your workplace is a really important thing to do. And many people with pain may also have a compensable condition. And I think it's very important to grasp what it is that your insurer can do for you in terms of occupational rehabilitation. And that's something that's much better available to people who are within the workers' compensation systems, perhaps compared to any sort of other part of the health system. And I think it's one of the things that's really important is to understand that there are timelines when various services are available to you, but those timelines aren't endless. And so knowing when those timelines are available and where the legislated return to work aspects sit can be really, really helpful for you. And so what I think is a good thing to do is don't put your head in the sand about going back to work, but be as proactive as you possibly can and think, okay, where are the benefits for me in this system? What can I access that will be really helpful? And one of the important things that I didn't understand until I did some work within workers' compensation is that you need to be certified as having some capacity to be able to do just some form of activity at work in order to be able to access occupational rehabilitation services. And so that's a really important thing. If your GP is certifying you without capacity, those services can't flow until your GP is saying you have some capacity to work. So that's a really important thing. The next thing I'd say is a team approach. And this is where so much of your healthcare team comes into play. So obviously physiotherapists, but also occupational therapists have a very good grasp on work. Your doctor, your psychologist, and maybe an exercise physiologist. You need everybody working around you in a team and to be able to set team-based goals around your return to work, where you're at the centre of all of that. And you might want to access titled pain physiotherapists who are physios with a special interest and special expertise in pain. And you can find them on the APA's Choose Physio website under Find a Physio. And here I would suggest that for those who are paying for their own allied healthcare for their pain, use those 5 Medicare sessions, those subsidised sessions, because what that does is allow you to also have case conferences that Medicare will pay that you can be part of and your whole team can be part of as well. And while 5 sessions isn't a great deal, it is at least a starting point to help you with that team approach. In terms of the other sorts of things that I work on my patients with when they're looking to return to work, it's around working out those activities that you need to be able to do, doing really specified pacing pathways towards that, setting goals, and also working out flare-up plans that can help when pain, as it does, has its inevitable ups and downs. So in a very brief way, they're the sort of things that I would really emphasise here.
Thanks, Anne. And just to clarify, APA, that's
Australian Physiotherapy Association.
Right, so people can go to that website, find themselves an accredited physio with an interest in pain.
Yeah, so they're specially credentialed. They've got extra experience and qualifications related to pain.
Right.
There's lots of physios that understand pain and are great with it, but if you go down into this website in the Find a Physio and look for specialised and titled physios, you can find a pain physio.
That's great. And also in that list of allied health would be rehab counsellors too, who are very, very helpful for people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, what a terrific overview of what people can do. Thanks, Anne. I think that the work, and you also mentioned legislation, and I think that the legislation around the country is unique to each state, isn't it? So if you're in New South Wales, it might be different to Western Australia or Tasmania.
Absolutely. One of those things about our federation, every state has different rules, different availability of services, different timelines when it comes to compensation healthcare, which is just makes the situation even more complex.
And one of the themes that came out of your words there was the idea that the person in pain can lead that team and can take somewhat some control over what happens, and really makes a difference, doesn't it?
Yeah, look, absolutely. And I think it's about being sort of upfront about what your goals are around return to work and realizing that even though many people with pain have left the workforce, the majority of people in Australia living with persistent pain are able to remain in the workplace to some extent. And the benefits of that are great, even though I don't underestimate how difficult that is at times.
It can be, and employers are a mixed bunch too, aren't they?
Absolutely.
Some will get it and some might not.
And sometimes I'm surprised by how excellent some employers are.
Yeah, sure.
They really work very hard on this.
Yeah, it's great. Thanks, Anne. Look, I want to move on. I want to talk about, I mean, related to work, if you can't work, often it's really having an impact on your household finances. And when something has an impact on your household finances, it's going to have an impact on your whole family. And not surprisingly, 2/3 of respondents to this National Pain Survey of 2024 feel that their condition really has an impact on family relationships. They're quite strained because of pain. Over 60% report reduced intimacy or struggle to have sex due to their pain, and nearly half struggle to pick up or play with their children. And this is a long-standing theme. I remember way back, 10 years ago when I was seeing people in pain as a counsellor, it used to shock me that stories like, my children, when I'm on the ground because I'm just in so much pain, my children actually step over me and continue. I'll never forget that story. It's horrendous. But anyway, look, I want just to pass over to Kim. Kim is our pain warrior and ambassador for others who are living with chronic pain. I want her, Kim, welcome to National Pain Week. Would you mind giving us an idea of just that? What is the impact of chronic pain on relationships for people who, like yourself, who are living with pain every day?
Thanks, Coralie. Thank you for having me. So my personal pain journey has been quite hard. The relationships with my children, I have 3 children who have disabilities, and I'm their primary carer. My husband works quite a lot, so he's hardly ever home. I found that I had to back off with the care and sort of hand it out and get asked for help, which is really, really hard. Therefore, I felt useless. So therefore, I started withdrawing from just family activities, friends, my husband as well. And I found that it was just easier for me to hide away than to have to work with those relationships because I'm trying to deal with so much all at once. I noticed that the isolation is quite significant, and it sort of puts strains on family, friends, work, anything, any sort of like relationship that you have. And I stopped joining in with my kids when, they're playing or when they want to go out somewhere or for a walk. I stopped that. It was easier for me to isolate myself and not complain about my pain, not be a downer. And I just found it was extremely hard. It's still every day a struggle. I try to do as much as I can, but there still is that strain on all of my relationships.
Kim, have you found that strain has reduced as you've become more able to access strategies to manage the pain?
Yeah, that's right. So I found in the beginning it was just so much easier to withdraw. Then I started getting a team together with my pain specialist, physiotherapist, my GP, got them all on the same road. That sort of relieved my stress, and therefore I was not withdrawing as much. And then obviously I've got strategies in play where, you know, I know what I'm meant to be doing, what I'm not meant to be doing, and how to build on those relationships and try to build them back. I find that if I do the necessary steps, I can sort of build back that relationship and take the strain off. But sometimes it's just too hard when you're trying to deal with, you know, your own pain and doing the right thing in that area, and then trying to build the relationships on top of that as well.
That sounds like a big burden for one person. Do your kids do your children understand better what's going on for you? Has there been any kind of corresponding growth in their understanding and ability to bridge gaps with you?
So before I actually knew what I had, like my diagnosis, it was very hard for them to understand because all they knew was that I was in pain and I wasn't helping myself. So once I had the diagnosis and stuff, I found that I could sit them down, explain exactly what I had and how it felt and where I was going from there and how I was going to help myself. And, you know, I have from like a 13-year-old, an 18-year-old and a 20-year-old. So the older ones had a better understanding than the younger one. And it's every day, it's a new question about, well, why are you like this? Why are you doing this? And it's explaining and not remaining silent.
Well,
Telling them, explaining how I feel, why I feel like that, and what my boundaries are. I found that once I sat and explained it, they had a better understanding and they didn't expect as much in return, and they understood why I do withdraw. However, it still puts a strain on, you know, the whole family, and it's, you know, it makes you feel like, you know, you're useless, to be honest.
That's the enemy, isn't it?
Correct.
That judgment on yourself.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
And you know, you're your own worst enemy when it comes to judgment.
Sometimes. Well, look, I'm looking forward to hearing more from you, Kim. I want to just move on to another one of these amazing findings from the National Pain Survey, and that is that the stigma and the barriers that exist for young Australians, and the fact that there is something called reverse ageism that's creating stigma and barriers to care for younger Australians. 9 out of 10 of our respondents in the 18 to 34, the younger group, report being ignored or dismissed by health professionals. I mean, you're young, you can't have pain. This is an old person's problem. That kind of attitude. Significantly more in that age group have had thoughts of self-harm and suicide attempts. That really bothers me. I mean, I've got children in that age group, and I know that they're already carrying a load without chronic pain. They're carrying a load of anxiety because of the world we live in, because of the digital revolution, all of that stuff. We know that. That's evidence-based. But then to add chronic pain into that, it must be overwhelming. There was the other thing that came out of it was that there was a strong correlation between neurodivergence and chronic pain. Those reporting ADHD were 3 times more than the general population, and those with autism spectrum, those identifying with autism spectrum disorder, were 10 times the number in the general population. These are extraordinary figures. And I wonder, Dr. Mick Bagg, can I bring you in here? You're a pain specialist. Is this your experience? And you know, you see patients all the time. What are your recommendations for young Australians with chronic pain?
Sure. Look, it's actually, and again, good morning, everyone, and it's great to be able to chat. It's the relationship between attentional function and pain has been of interest for quite some time in pain research, and certainly our psychologist who regularly tests new patients with ADHD questionnaires would not be at all surprised with these findings, because he makes a diagnosis of ADHD in perhaps 10% of the new patients that he sees where it's never been made before. So whether it is in some way related to the development of the pain, or whether it's just that people with problems with their attentional function, have trouble filtering pain or managing the pain in the brain. And we have some evidence from people, for instance, with Alzheimer's disease or acquired brain injury, where they have reduced frontal lobe function. They also have a reduced placebo response, and they're not able to filter pain as effectively. So we've known that for a long time. It wouldn't be surprising if there was a significant correlation between attentional disorders and neurodiversity. Autism spectrum disorders we are less certain about because there just isn't enough research into it, and we know enough to know that both the incidence and the awareness are rising. So it feels like there's a flood of new diagnoses, but there are more people being diagnosed accurately, and there is more awareness of what those diagnoses mean. And I'm surprised that that is such a high correlation, and I think that urgently needs to be explained, because that is such a strong correlation that you know, it could in fact be a causative contribution, but we really need to understand that a lot better. In terms of you know, young people and chronic pain, it's very, very important to try and be an advocate and to inform yourself. The ACI Pain Bites website that's based in New South Wales is an extremely valuable resource for young people with pain. They've put a lot of effort into that site, and so much so that I think most other people don't bother building their own website for young people with pain. They just send everybody to that one because it's really valuable. And you know, I think the thing for people looking after people who have pain, what we need to understand also is that the difference in young people is it's about trying to help them realise their potential. It's very different having chronic pain as a 55-year-old brickie versus a 17-year-old school student, because one person has already had a lot of their adult life. One person doesn't even necessarily know what they want to do in life. And you know, I actually have a patient who I've been looking after for about the last 6 years or so, who, when I first met her, she was 16, extremely intelligent, but also very withdrawn, in huge amounts of pain, highly disabled, not attending school for consistent periods of time. We did have to go to quite some lengths with very specialised treatments in order to generate some forward momentum. She got a subsequent diagnosis of ADHD a couple of years after I first began treating her. And when she came in for a ketamine infusion about this time last year, she brought with her her letter of offer from a medical school. She was very proud to show me that she'd managed to get into, she threatened to do it, and I have to say she backed it up. So the thing was, I had, this is what can happen if people get the right, young people get the right team around them, and they get the right advice, the nudges in the right direction, and they're open to thinking of things differently and learning to do things in a way that can accommodate their pain. So in that particular case, I think it, as I say, it just shows what young people are capable of if you can remove some of the barriers to them achieving their potential. And that's the mindset that's very different when you're a clinician looking after someone who's young.
Thank you, Mick. What an incredible story about that 16-year-old.
Could have almost been written for this.
Yeah, it could. So thanks, Mick. And I want to hand over to Professor Mark Hutchinson now. Mark, we see every national pain report say that the minority of vulnerable populations are the ones that are the most impacted. Are the research projects targeting these populations?
Thank you, Coralie. Colleagues, thank you for the opportunity to join you. Glass half full, glass half empty to me. I'm glass half full because more research is being done. But the glass half empty part is there's an awful lot more research being done about everything else other than chronic pain. And so then when we start focusing in on pain in minority groups, that then becomes even more rare amongst a rare activity of research. So I think what we're seeing here is over the last 5 years, there has been more attention on appropriate translation of cellular and molecular research into relevant preclinical models into clinical trials, but still there's more to be done. The federal government have just announced a new chronic pain initiative funded by the Medical Research Future Fund. And I think what we need to be doing from a clinical research perspective is engaging with consumers earlier. I mean, this is rocket science, right? Actually talking to the people who are experiencing the problems to then design the trials. What a revolutionary idea. And yet, that is what I have to be reminding my research peers to do regularly, because otherwise we just start researching the boring stuff, the stuff that actually is too generic, and we aren't targeting the specialist, the defined domains we need to. The final piece that I think we need to acknowledge is we do not know what chronic pain actually is. Now, that again is a good glass half full, glass half empty scenario, because if we did and we've still got the problem today, that's a really bad story. But the good piece is we don't know. And so there is an opportunity to actually identify a solution. And then crucially, is pain the same if we are a child, if we're a teenager, if we're a 20-something versus a 30-something versus a 50-something? And what we are now seeing is the actual molecular signatures that are at play in each of these different age groups may be slightly different, meaning we can actually start treating pain with precision medicine. Now, this is something that our oncology friends have been doing for years, and they actually do a defined genetic test to determine what cancer you get, and you get a drug matched to that, and a treatment program matched to that. This is not far off now. And I think this is where there will be, in the next few years, some really exciting breakthroughs that will come out of Australian research specifically to address this challenge. But we have an awful lot more to do, and we need to keep talking to our elected officials to make sure that they realise pain is a massive problem, and we need to have specialist research programs directed towards solutions rather than just admiring the problem of, oh, here we can see what pain is at a molecular level.
Isn't that interesting, Mark, that the idea of doing very technical research sort of gets traction in the traditional way of funding. And yet, you know, your rocket science moment where you say, how about we talk to the consumers, the people that are actually experiencing this problem, and why don't we have the conversation about what sort of research, how we might go about it. And I know in my own research, because I work with consumers as participants in research, and remarkably, when it comes to understanding the meaning of the results, you get aha moments.
Right.
When there are people in the room who are the people with the problem.
And Coralie, I think the other part is, let's not have the conversation the week before the grant is due. Let's actually have this as an ongoing dialogue of engagement and learning and conversation, but crucially, deriving hope from those conversations. And I think that's something that I'm really keen and excited to see develop in Australia over time.
Good on you, Mark. That's really, really excellent. I think it's really sort of exciting that there may be sort of in the chronic pain world, there might be, in fact, targeted medicines that identify what is the molecular substrate of this particular pain experience. That's really, really exciting. Thank you so much, Mark. You know, there were other things that came through in this survey which were quite disturbing, and that is that half of the women that responded report stigma from health professionals, and almost 40% feel that it's coming from their GP. So, I mean, I guess this means that the world is not an isomorphic, you know, it's not, A does not equal B. The other thing that came through, and medical misogyny, might I say, way back in the day when I was counselling and my people were people with chronic pain, that was a pretty strong theme in many of the stories that I was privileged to hear. Another one is coming from people on the LGBTQIA plus spectrum who are saying that they experience higher than average mental health issues, with pain affecting sleep, work, intimacy and independence. And I'm really pleased that Chronic Pain Australia is having a close look at that. And also how long it takes to get a diagnosis. 45% of respondents said it took longer than 3 years to get a diagnosis. I mean, in the olden days, there wasn't a diagnosis because it wasn't medically explained. At least now we have this cognizance that there is this thing called this phenomenon called chronic pain that deserves a diagnosis of its own. But among them, women and non-binary respondents face even longer delays. Here we go. Here's the circle. Nearly half of women and almost 6% of non-binary respondents wait for more than 3 years. So this is quite disturbing, because while you're not sure of what's going on, you're looking for an answer, looking for a validation, looking to see, am I mad? Am I actually going insane? Kim, do you relate to this? Is this something that you relate to as a woman with chronic pain? Have you experienced gender-based discrimination?
Yes, definitely. I found it was rubbed off as something else that I already previously had. I was told, maybe if you just lose some weight, it might help with your foot. I was told, just give it another week and we'll see how we go. I just was fobbed off. And then eventually it was to the point where they said, all right, we'll send you for an x-ray and an ultrasound. And I went and did those. They couldn't see what was wrong. So then it went back again to, well, maybe could it be in your head?
Yeah.
It's not in my head. I'm feeling it. It's very real. I might not look like I'm, a 10 out of 10 in the pain scale, but I'm there. I'm just masking. And I had to push and be my own advocate. I pushed to see, a specialist. I pushed to have all these testings done just so I could get an answer, so I could, be taken seriously. Like, this is why, it lingered on. It was like, and my husband actually has a chronic back pain, and he was taken seriously the first time he was taken to the doctor. He was sent for tests that same day. Why wasn't I? It ate me up. And, I facilitate a chronic pain, like support group, and it's a women's support group. And majority of them have experienced the same as well. Because I thought I was alone, just being, oh, it's just you, you already have this, so maybe it's something got to do with that. Now go lose weight and then come back to me when you've lost weight and we'll see how you feel. It made me think everything was in my head. I got to the point where my husband's a butcher, and he found me on the kitchen floor when he walked in from work with his meat cleaver, trying to work off, do I cut my foot off first and call an ambulance, or do I call an ambulance then cut my foot off? Because I got to the point where I thought, I can't do this anymore. And eventually the doctor actually said, we'll send you to this specialist. And I said to my husband, this is my last resort. If I do not have a diagnosis and they keep telling me it's in my head or I'm fobbed off, I was actually going to admit myself to a psychiatric ward, because I thought it must be in my head. It's, my husband with his chronic back pain, he went for his tests. Here, take this medication, no questions asked. But for myself, it felt like I had to run around the bush to get into the middle of the bush. And I put it down to being a female. And the other thing that sort of, I think, contributed to it is that I'm an Indigenous person. And I find that with that as well, I also have a lot of trouble filling my scripts for my opioids, because once they read CTG on my scripts go into a lockbox, and I have to take them to the counter. I have to sign for them, and until I pay, they will not unlock my script. However, I know it's just me, because at the same time I was there was another woman there who got the same medication as me, and she walked to the counter with her medication. So there's a lot of barriers in, female, your race, how you identify. It's really, really hard. But yeah, definitely I got the runaround from, doctors and specialists.
Kim, I suspect that just that runaround and the delays and the stigma and the discrimination and even just the embarrassment when you're in the pharmacist, I suspect that all adds to the chronic pain experience, to be honest.
Most definitely. Stress is, a very big part of chronic pain. The more stress you're in, the more your pain starts to play up. You can't control it. You end up in a flare-up. You know, you spiral into a depression, your anxiety elevates, and then we go back to, you know, the relationship strains. It's just a really vicious circle. So to make it harder for somebody to try and help themselves, it's just producing more pain in the end when you're having to run around the bush, you know, and pushed around and basically, you know, fobbed off of like, it's fine, you'll be fine, give it a week. You know, maybe you strained yourself, maybe you did something you don't know you've done. And, you know, just that downplaying it. And it elevates your stress and anxiety and depression. And then you get into, you know, a wormhole where you can't get out of because you're on so many medications now and you're stuck and you don't have that support.
I'm really sorry to hear that. And I think, you know, you've hit on the other aspect, which is the intersectional nature, that when you've got one thing wrong, you know, chronic pain, you know, your foot, failure to diagnose, and then you've got the other layers, being a woman, being First Nations, postcode even, you know, there's so many factors that come in to this automatic way that we are read by others. But it sounds like you're not doing too bad at the moment. It sounds like you've found some ways to sort of climb on top of that unpleasant mountain and assert yourself.
Most definitely. I actually was told to sign myself up for a pain course and I didn't take it seriously because I thought, I know what I'm dealing with. Why do I have to do a course? You know, I started it and then I had depression and I wouldn't go to the doctor again to say, hey, now I'm feeling depressed because it was just another thing. And I just felt pushed aside. So I actually went back and did the pain course seriously, took it seriously, went through the steps. And I thought, if I don't help myself, nobody's going to help me. So I did that and, you know, I'm in a better place now, but you've got to speak up and ask for the help.
Kim, thank you so much and congratulations. I realise we're running a little bit behind and I apologise for that. But I want to move on to Nicolette and ask the question, Nicolette, what is CPA doing to help minorities and vulnerable communities feel less isolated with their chronic pain?
Thanks, Dr. Wales, and thank you to Kim as well for sharing that experience. And it just really enrages me to hear these experiences, particularly of minorities. I'm a gay woman myself. I have my beautiful wife and 2 small children, and I've experienced such discrimination from health professionals. And my wife also has chronic pain, and we've had similar experiences to what Kim was experiencing. And it's really what sort of drives me and also all of the volunteers who work at Chronic Pain Australia to make these changes, because if it's not there, we have to build it. I think that's really what resonates with me from Chronic Pain Australia. So Kim providing her support groups to a women's only group so that they don't feel isolated. Hopefully they're not having the same experiences, or at least they have a shoulder to cry on for those experiences. So for the LGBTQIA plus community, we have a Queers in Pain support group that's run by, shout out to Safari and Kevin, who are amazing peer supporters. And we've been working really closely with an amazing researcher at the University of Queensland, Dr. Megan Ross. And we're looking at getting a 5-year grant. And this is one of the things that Mark was talking about, is talking with the consumer organisation, working with them closely for things that really create a difference for people with chronic pain. And specifically, we want to increase the inclusivity of health professionals when they're working with other minorities. And that's a key aspect of what we're trying to achieve at Chronic Pain Australia, and build something so that people can be heard and listened to in their own experiences. You're on mute, Coralie.
It's really helpful to understand that you're in there as an advocate and somebody who lives with the problem and cares deeply from a lived experience point of view, and good on Chronic Pain Australia. Mark, can we come back to you? This slow diagnosis issue, is there any hope from our research colleagues to change this particular statistic?
Yeah, thanks, Crowley. So of the domains that I think we're going to see the biggest change in the next 5 years is actually the diagnosis domain. Finally, we've acknowledged that pain is a complex biopsychosocial problem, as Kim just beautifully articulated. It's not just about the big left toe. It's actually about the state you are in, your cognitive state, your well-being, the environment you're in. And when we start looking at the diagnosis of this, it's not then just imaging the big left toe. That's not necessarily the entire complexity of it. And there are technologies now that are being developed, and our understanding of pain is developing to a state that we actually now have capabilities and startup companies who are starting to explore this. That is exciting, but glass half empty. It'll be admiring the problem for a while before we then have the medicines to selectively engage that. But the crucial thing here is that unless we can actually measure something, we can't speed through and do the clinical trials to validate whether the drug's actually working or not, or the therapy broadly. It doesn't have to be drug-based. It could be therapy-based. And so where I'm seeing this now coming through is the National Institute of Health in the US have put a lot of money behind objective biomarkers and measurement of pain, and those are coming online shortly. We're doing our own work in that space. But the key part here is that we don't know the edges yet of the diagnosis of these tools. So if my tool says, you don't have that pain state, Kim, am I going to go, Kim's going to go, what the hell, Mark? I do, damn it. And you should be listening to what I'm saying. So I think we need to have an ongoing dialogue around how we responsibly use this technology going forward that supports clinicians, great clinicians like Mick, helping people, but also supports Kim, people like Kim, finding solutions that work for them and validates that outcome as quickly as possible. And we're not there yet. So hopefully when we're having this conversation next year, I hope we can say we've started that and we've got the technologies and we're starting to roll it forward.
Thanks very much, Mark. And what about Mick? Mick, what are your thoughts about how do people in pain move more deftly into a diagnosis for chronic pain?
Yeah, look, I think it's really challenging because you need to have someone who is a pain literate professional, and pain specialists, there's only about 470 of them in active practice around Australia, and most of those don't work full time in pain. So it's got to start with primary care, general practitioners, titled physiotherapists, special interest psychologists, people in the community. And what I really would like to ask the community watching is to put the heat on your politicians to fund Medicare item numbers that will make it possible to move pain diagnosis and expert treatment out of hospitals and into the community. Because at the moment we don't have high numbers of pain specialists, but what actually traps us and our teams in the hospital is the ability to get funded by Medicare. So that is going to be a critical thing going forward, and it doesn't happen unless the politicians get some heat in their local offices about it. So if we have a national audience, please go out and do that. But more personally, for people who have a diagnosis or have pain that isn't improving, maybe there is a chronic pain diagnosis there. Be aware that it is a whole life problem and it's going to need a whole life solution if it is to be properly managed. And that's the theme of what we've been talking about today. It has to be an all-inclusive formulation by your health team, which leads to an all-inclusive response.
Yeah.
And that's the key thing to aim.
Thanks, Mick. I mean, I want to hand over to Joyce now, finally, because really the nub of this problem is that we need care close to home. And in Australia, we call that primary care. That's your GP and care close to home. Joyce, I know that you're really active in the primary care sphere as a really credentialed pain clinician. But one in 100 people can access care in a hospital, multidisciplinary team care. And I know Chronic Pain Australia is advocating that this care should be available to people in the primary sector. Joyce, do you want to say a few words about the potential for multidisciplinary team care in the primary care sector and its benefits, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And the panel's been just so awesome. And I've also been looking at some of the chats online as well. So I'll acknowledge all of that because I think it comes very nicely into my part. So First of all, I think we can see that while we all know the problem, and as Mark says, looking and admiring on these figures, it's simply not good enough. And we really do need solutions. And hearing from Kim, the fact that, when she attended the pain course, the pain program, that really started to get her a bit more immersed into solutions-based thinking. And I really, truly, in the 10 years of innovations in primary care, bringing care really close to home, a lot of the solutions have been found by the patients themselves. These conquerors with support do come to the solution. So as clinicians, we need to listen to what those clues are. Of course, when you're suffering pain, it's really tricky amongst everything else and all the life struggles to coordinate that yourself. It is really tough. Right hand doesn't talk to left hand. I've seen some chats along the Facebook group about, clinicians not talking to each other. And that also comes back to well-credentialed clinicians. So a couple of hopeful things that I think I'll talk about quickly. One, in terms of clinicians' education, I know the Faculty of Pain Medicine are doing some work around that. About to be launched in the next 6 months is a wonderful it's called Open Learning Program that will be available to doctors and clinicians. And it's been so beautifully co-designed with patients. 2 simple words that's going to strike, which is listen to me, learn from me. I mean, those are simple words. Of course, within the modules, they'll really impress on clinicians to really validate, destigmatize, and also learn the signs of pain. So watch out for, that with the clinical world to really embrace that. From the patient world, definitely access. So access with the support of multidisciplinary support. Now, that's easy to say, but when you're not working, you've got very limited income, it's very expensive to access care. And care close to home is even more expensive because it's not available. So sometimes you really don't blame the patient when they're looking at a, $6 oxycodone, which then they get stigmatized on based on, I would love to see the physio, but I just can't eat today. So I think what we need to do is we really do need to advocate to government for more access to multidisciplinary pain programs within primary health networks. There's no doubt that those work. I've spent 10 plus years of my life designing the models. The health economic is a no-brainer. We will save the $215 billion easily. There will be profit left over to be spent on people being able to go back to work and having a meaningful life. That has been acknowledged by the Productivity Commissioner in some really good researched work. So, yeah.
Joyce, that's beautiful. I mean, what a great note to end on, that there is hope and that it is coming soon, that this wonderful work you've been leading for 10 years is now coming to fruition. I love that. Listen to me, learn from me. This is really consumer focused. And I think that the overall message that I'm getting from this year's National Pain Week survey and panel is that there is hope for people in pain, that it is closer to home, it's coming, that the consumer is being really the centre of most of the work that, Mark talked about, putting the consumer at the centre of the research agenda. Mick is talking about listening to the stories of his patients and how that really drives the work that he's leading. Kim, it was terrific to have you reminding us of the reality of chronic pain. And of course, coming back to Anne, don't leave work if you can. If you can really hang on to that job. It's been thank you very much to all of our panelists. And can we have a big round of applause for everybody, please? It's been such a great discussion. Thank you. And thank you to Chronic Pain Australia in particular, because without Chronic Pain Australia and all of the hours and all of the heartfelt hours that goes in from the volunteers at Chronic Pain Australia, none of this would happen. And of course, today's panel has been seamless and fantastic. Great effort from everybody. Thank you so much. And I'm going to say, please watch this space, because I think this panel recording will be available for anybody who has missed it. And once again, thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you to Chronic Pain Australia.